Amelia could never sit still for too long. She had an endless curiosity about everything around her, from the swirling patterns of the clouds to the smallest bug crawling in the backyard. At just 9 years old, she was a mix of wild imagination and gentle kindness, a combination that made her a light in her family. She had a way of getting lost in her own world, often humming quietly to herself as she drew intricate pictures of imaginary creatures and lands far beyond anything she had ever seen. Her family adored her, each in their own way. Her mom, Sarah, was a teacher, and though she often brought work home, she always found time to listen to Amelia's endless tales. Her dad, James, was an engineer, more on the quiet side, but he was always there to encourage Amelia's love for exploring, taking her on nature walks and teaching her about the plants and animals they'd encounter. Then there was Ben, her 12-year-old brother, who had mastered the art of both annoying and protecting her, a balance only siblings seemed to understand. Their house, though modest, was warm and always filled with laughter and the sound of Amelia's giggles or Ben's playful teasing. But lately, things had started to change for Amelia, and she couldn't quite understand why. It began subtly, so subtly that she didn't even notice it at first. She felt a slight pressure in her lower stomach that she brushed off as nothing important. But as days turned into weeks, that small discomfort grew. Her belly began to feel heavier, and sometimes, when she was lying down, she thought she could feel it pressing back, almost as if something were inside her. She thought it was her imagination, a trick of her mind, but it left her feeling oddly connected to whatever was growing within her. Amelia didn't mention it at first. She was used to her imagination running wild, and she didn't want her family to think she was being dramatic. But her mom, with a mother's instinct, started to notice the small changes. Amelia didn't have the same energy she used to, and sometimes she would rest her hand on her stomach, a gesture that hadn't been there before. One evening, while Amelia was sitting at the dinner table, Sarah's concern finally broke through. "Amelia, sweetheart," Sarah began, watching her daughter with gentle eyes, "are you feeling okay? You've been looking a little tired lately." Amelia hesitated, glancing at her mom and then down at her plate. She didn't want to worry her, but she also felt relieved that someone had noticed. "I think so, but my tummy feels a bit weird. It's like something's in there." James and Ben both looked up, exchanging glances. James put his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. "It's probably just a tummy ache. You're growing up so fast, maybe it's just a growth spurt." But as the days continued, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Amelia's belly seemed to be growing, not in a typical way for a girl her age. It was subtle at first, but soon, the slight curve became noticeable, and it was enough to prompt Sarah to make an appointment with their family doctor. Amelia was nervous, but a part of her felt excited, too, like she was carrying a special secret inside her. The night before the doctor's visit, Amelia lay in bed, her hands resting gently on her stomach. She whispered softly to herself, "If you're really there, little friend, I'm not afraid of you. I'll take care of you." To her, it felt comforting to think of the presence as a friend, a quiet companion who'd been with her all along, waiting to reveal itself. The next morning, Sarah and James took Amelia to the small, cozy clinic where Dr. Reeves, their family doctor, worked. Dr. Reeves had known Amelia since she was a toddler, and his gentle manner immediately made her feel safe. He started with simple questions, checking her vital signs and running through the standard physical exam. As he gently pressed on her stomach, his face shifted, just a hint of surprise, which he quickly masked with a calm smile. "Amelia, does it hurt when I press here?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. "Not really," she replied, shaking her head. "It just feels like something's there. Like a little friend." Dr. Reeves looked up at Sarah and James, a subtle furrow appearing in his brow. "I think we should do a few more tests to understand what might be causing this. It could be something simple, but it's best to take a closer look." Sarah felt a surge of worry, though she tried her best to remain calm. Amelia sensed her mom's concern and reached for her hand. "It's okay, Mom. I think my little friend just wants to say hello." They scheduled an ultrasound for the following week. As the days went by, Amelia continued to talk to her little friend, feeling a strange connection with whatever was growing inside her. She didn't feel afraid, just curious. To her, it felt almost magical, like the beginning of an adventure, a mystery that only she could solve. When the day of the ultrasound finally arrived, Amelia was both nervous and excited. As she lay on the examination table, the ultrasound technician applied a cold gel to her stomach and moved the wand gently over her skin. Amelia watched the screen with wide eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of her little friend. As the image came into focus, the technician's face shifted for just a split second before she looked at Amelia with a reassuring smile. "We're going to let Dr. Reeves take a look at this, okay?" Amelia nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and a small, growing sense of wonder. She had no idea what the ultrasound would reveal, but she knew that whatever it was, her little friend was real. And somehow, in the mystery of it all, she felt safe, knowing she was not alone. The next few days seemed to pass in a blur for Amelia's family. Sarah and James couldn't shake the worry that had settled in since their visit to Dr. Reeves. Though he'd been calm and reassuring, something in his tone had left them with lingering doubts. They knew they needed answers, but the unknown felt like a dark cloud hanging over them. Amelia, on the other hand, had a different approach. She continued to think of her little friend with curiosity and care, often daydreaming about what it might look like. Was it like her, with a heart and eyes, waiting to meet her someday? She didn't voice these thoughts often, sensing the concern in her parents' eyes whenever the topic came up. But she found comfort in quietly talking to her friend, whispering things only the two of them could share. The following week, Sarah and James took Amelia back to Dr. Reeves for a follow-up. He wanted to review the initial ultrasound results in person, hoping to provide some reassurance. As they entered his office, the doctor greeted them warmly, but his eyes betrayed a hint of seriousness that even Amelia could pick up on. "Thank you all for coming in today," Dr. Reeves began, taking a seat across from Amelia and her parents. "We've reviewed the initial images from the ultrasound, and while I don't want to jump to conclusions, there's something a bit unusual." Sarah reached for James's hand, and they exchanged a nervous glance. Amelia watched them both, sensing their unease, but she remained calm, squeezing her mother's hand for comfort. "Unusual?" James repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Reeves nodded. "Yes. There appears to be some kind of growth, something that isn't typical for a girl Amelia's age. At this stage, it's too early to know exactly what it is, but I think it would be wise to run a few more tests to understand better." He paused, gauging their reaction, before continuing. The next steps would involve some blood tests, and possibly another, more detailed ultrasound. These should help us get a clearer picture of what might be going on. Amelia tilted her head thoughtfully, still holding her mother's hand. "Will I see my friend again?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful. Dr. Reeves smiled gently at her question, charmed by her innocence. "Yes, Amelia. If we do another ultrasound, you might get another look at your friend." He glanced at Sarah and James, who nodded, ready to do whatever was needed. Over the next few days, Amelia went through the additional tests. She bravely extended her arm for blood work, squeezing her eyes shut and imagining herself with her friend, who she felt was right there with her. Each moment seemed surreal, almost like stepping into one of her own stories. The doctors and nurses would often share a small smile or reassuring word with her, though the worry on her parents' faces was always clear. As they waited for the results, Sarah tried to keep Amelia's spirits high. She'd take her daughter out for ice cream after each appointment, letting her pick the wildest flavors and piling on as many toppings as she wanted. They'd sit together, savoring the sweetness, finding small moments of comfort in the familiar rituals. But beneath the cheerful facade, Sarah's heart was breaking. She had always been Amelia's rock, the steady presence in her life, but now she felt helpless. James would reassure her each night, reminding her that they were doing everything possible, but a mother's heart always knows when something isn't right. Ben, too, began to sense that things were different. He noticed the hushed conversations his parents had when they thought he wasn't around, the way his mom's eyes would gloss over with worry. Though he was only 12, he'd started to understand that whatever was happening to Amelia was serious. Without saying anything, he took it upon himself to look out for his sister in ways he hadn't before, showing up at her bedroom door with a comic book or joining her in her made-up games, even if it meant being the villain in her latest story. One evening, as they sat together in Amelia's room, she turned to Ben with a look of seriousness he hadn't seen in her before. "Do you think my friend is real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben hesitated, unsure how to respond. He knew his sister's imagination had always been vivid, and he didn't want to crush her dreams. But something in her eyes made him realize that this was different. "I think, maybe they are, in their own way," he replied, his words chosen carefully. "If you believe they're real, then maybe they are." Amelia's face lit up, her eyes sparkling with a mix of relief and wonder. "Thanks, Ben. I knew you'd understand." The results from the additional tests came in a few days later, and Dr. Reeves scheduled another appointment to discuss them. Sarah and James entered the doctor's office with Amelia between them, their faces tense and their hands tightly clasped together. Dr. Reeves took a deep breath before speaking. "Well, I have some news," he began, choosing his words thoughtfully. "The good news is that we didn't find anything immediately harmful. But there is still something unusual that we can't quite identify. We might need to explore further with a few specialists who are better equipped to help us understand what's going on." He paused, his gaze shifting to Amelia. "You've been so brave, Amelia, and we're all here to help you. We just need a little more time to find out exactly what's happening." Amelia nodded, her expression calm. "It's okay, Dr. Reeves. I think my friend is just shy. Maybe they're waiting for the right time to show themselves." Dr. Reeves shared a look with her parents, both touched and intrigued by her resilience. They thanked him and left the office, heading home with a sense of both relief and lingering uncertainty. Amelia's mystery was still unsolved, but her faith in her friend gave her a strength that even her parents couldn't fully comprehend. And for Amelia, each day felt like another piece of the puzzle. Whatever her friend was, she was certain they were with her, just waiting to be revealed. The following week, Amelia and her family prepared for their trip to the specialty hospital, a larger medical center known for handling complex cases. Sarah and James were grateful for Dr. Reeves' guidance and support, but the lack of concrete answers had only intensified their anxiety. They hoped that, at this hospital, they would finally get the clarity they needed. Amelia was excited, though, not entirely understanding the gravity of the situation. To her, it felt like a new adventure, another chapter in her story with her little friend. She even packed a small notebook to document what she called her baby's journey, filled with doodles and thoughts about her friend. Each page had a picture of what she imagined they looked like, sometimes as a little bean, other times as a tiny version of herself. She liked to think her friend would have her eyes and her laughter. Her mom noticed the notebook as she helped Amelia pack, a small pang tugging at her heart. "You really believe your friend is there, don't you?" she asked, brushing a lock of Amelia's hair behind her ear. Amelia nodded earnestly. "I don't just believe it, Mom. I know it. I can feel them. And they're nice. They don't make me feel scared at all." Sarah forced a smile, feeling her throat tighten. "Well, that's good, honey. I'm glad they make you feel safe." As they packed into the car and began the drive to the hospital, the family tried to keep the mood light. They played Amelia's favorite road trip game, I Spy, taking turns looking for objects as they passed trees, fields, and small towns. Even Ben, who usually rolled his eyes at the game, joined in to make Amelia laugh. But as they got closer to the hospital, the mood shifted. Amelia noticed the way her parents' laughter became quieter, more forced, as if they were each holding their breath, bracing for what was to come. She felt a slight twist of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by the thought of seeing her friend again through the ultrasound screen. She imagined the day she would introduce them to everyone, and they'd all understand that her friend was real. When they arrived at the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the white, gleaming walls greeted them. It was bigger than their local clinic, bustling with doctors, nurses, and other patients moving in every direction. Amelia clutched her notebook tightly, her small hand finding her mother's, and they made their way to the waiting area, where her parents filled out forms and waited to be called. Finally, a nurse with a kind smile came to guide them down a long, quiet hallway. "Amelia, are you ready?" she asked gently. Amelia nodded, her heart thudding with both excitement and a tinge of nervousness. She could tell from the way her mom squeezed her hand that this was important. As they reached the examination room, she climbed onto the table, kicking her feet while the nurse adjusted the equipment. Dr. Collins, a pediatric specialist with a calm demeanor, entered the room, introducing himself warmly. He looked over her chart, then smiled down at Amelia. "I hear you've got a special friend you're bringing along," he said. Amelia beamed. "Yes. But they're really shy, I think. They haven't said hello to anyone else yet." Dr. Collins chuckled, clearly charmed by her innocence. "Well, let's see if we can say hello today." He turned to her parents, his expression softening. "We'll take a closer look and see if we can figure out what's going on. I'll walk you through everything." As Dr. Collins prepared for the ultrasound, Amelia lay back, a little more at ease than her parents, who stood to the side, gripping each other's hands tightly. The room was quiet, the low hum of the ultrasound machine the only sound. Dr. Collins applied the cool gel to Amelia's stomach and began moving the wand gently over her skin, his eyes on the screen. Amelia's eyes stayed glued to the monitor, watching as strange shapes appeared and faded in and out of focus. To her, it was like watching clouds pass by. She strained to see if she could spot anything that looked like her friend. But Dr. Collins' face grew more serious as he examined the images. He took his time, moving the wand over different areas and studying the shapes and shadows on the screen. Finally, he looked up at Sarah and James, his expression careful. "There's something here," he began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "It's not a baby, Amelia. But it's also not quite what we typically see in cases like this." James swallowed hard, his hand tightening around Sarah's. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Collins took a deep breath, his gaze shifting back to the screen. "We're seeing what appears to be a rare kind of growth, something we call a fetus in fetu." He paused, letting the words settle. "It's a very unusual condition where a twin doesn't fully develop and remains within the other. It's incredibly rare, and in most cases, it's benign." Sarah's face went pale, her mind racing to understand. "So, Amelia has a twin?" "In a sense," Dr. Collins nodded. "But it's not a twin that could have developed into a separate person. It's an undeveloped formation, likely harmless, but it would need to be removed to ensure Amelia's health." Amelia was quiet, trying to process the words. "So, my friend is real?" she asked, her voice soft and filled with wonder. Dr. Collins looked at her with a gentle smile. "Yes, Amelia. In a way, your friend is real. They've been with you all along." A deep sense of calm and understanding washed over Amelia. Her little friend wasn't just in her imagination, they were real, a part of her. She reached for her mom's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I told you," she whispered, a tiny smile spreading across her face. Sarah looked down at her daughter, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and awe. This journey was far from over, but in that moment, she knew they were exactly where they needed to be, ready to face the next step. Amelia's next visit with Dr. Collins came only a few days after the initial revelation, but for her family, it felt like an eternity. The idea of their daughter carrying an undeveloped twin, something so rare it hardly seemed real, was both unsettling and surreal. Amelia, however, took it with an unexpected calmness. To her, the news was like something out of one of her stories, and Dr. Collins was the wise figure helping her navigate this strange, magical journey. When they arrived at the hospital, Amelia seemed relaxed, even a little excited. She held her notebook, which now had additional pages filled with pictures of her friend, whom she had started calling My Little Shadow. For her, the drawings helped make sense of it all, giving shape and life to the mystery she carried inside her. Dr. Collins greeted them in the waiting area, his warm smile and gentle voice immediately easing any lingering anxiety. He knelt down to Amelia's level, his gaze kind and sincere. "Hello, Amelia. How are you feeling today?" Amelia shrugged, smiling back. "Pretty good. I've been drawing Little Shadow." She held up her notebook, beaming as she showed him the illustrations. Dr. Collins took a moment to look through her drawings, nodding with genuine interest. "You're quite the artist, Amelia. It looks like you have a real connection with your little shadow." His words felt natural and unforced, as if he truly understood the bond she felt. Turning to her parents, Dr. Collins's tone became more serious, though still gentle. "I'd like to go over some more details with you, if that's okay." Sarah and James nodded, and he motioned for them to join him in his office while a nurse stayed with Amelia, offering her coloring sheets and crayons to keep her occupied. In his office, Dr. Collins explained the condition in more depth. He described fetus infetu as a condition so rare that only a few dozen cases had been documented worldwide. While the undeveloped twin posed no immediate threat, he recommended surgery to remove it, as it could lead to complications if left inside her. "Medically speaking, it's a simple procedure," he reassured them. "But I understand that, emotionally, this is not easy. I'll be here to guide you through every step." Sarah and James exchanged a glance, both feeling a sense of relief mingled with lingering uncertainty. "Thank you, Dr. Collins," James said quietly. "We've read so much online, it's overwhelming. But it's comforting to know Amelia is in good hands." Dr. Collins nodded. "Amelia is a remarkable little girl. Her strength and imagination are going to help her get through this. I think she has a special way of seeing things." After the consultation, Dr. Collins returned to the waiting area to find Amelia, who was deep in concentration, coloring in her picture of Little Shadow. She looked up as he approached, her expression curious. "Will I get to see my friend again before they're gone?" He sat beside her, nodding thoughtfully. "Yes, Amelia. We'll do another ultrasound before the surgery. You'll be able to say see you later in your own way. But remember, your friend is always part of you, even if they aren't inside you anymore." Amelia seemed to ponder his words, her face breaking into a small smile. "So they're like a little part of my heart?" Dr. Collins placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. They'll always be a part of your story." As they prepared for the days leading up to the surgery, Dr. Collins arranged for Amelia and her family to visit the hospital and meet some of the nurses who would be there on the big day. He wanted Amelia to feel comfortable, surrounded by familiar faces. The staff, charmed by her innocence and bravery, went out of their way to make her feel special, calling her our little artist and encouraging her to keep drawing. Meanwhile, Amelia continued to work on her notebook, now turning it into a storybook about Little Shadow's journey. She filled it with drawings and thoughts, capturing each part of her journey and the memories she wanted to keep. It was her way of saying goodbye, even if she didn't quite understand the meaning of goodbye yet. Dr. Collins visited her often, stopping by whenever he had a free moment. Sometimes, he'd bring her small gifts, like a new pack of colored pencils or a book with pictures of the stars and planets. "For your imagination," he'd say with a wink, always finding ways to lift her spirits. During one of these visits, Amelia looked up at him thoughtfully. "Dr. Collins, do you think Little Shadow will like the stars?" she asked, flipping through a page of star doodles in her notebook. "I think Little Shadow would love the stars, Amelia," he replied. "I think they'd be proud of you for being so brave." Amelia's face softened, and she nodded. "I'm not really scared. I know that wherever Little Shadow goes, they'll always have the stars to look at. Maybe they'll see me there, too." Her resilience amazed Dr. Collins. In all his years as a doctor, he'd rarely seen a child handle such an overwhelming experience with the quiet acceptance that Amelia showed. He knew the surgery would be a challenge, but he felt certain that Amelia's strength, and her family's support, would carry her through. As the days counted down, Amelia's family found moments of laughter and comfort, despite the growing tension. Sarah would tuck her in at night, singing softly to her, while James read her favorite bedtime stories, each of them cherishing these moments as they prepared for the uncertainty ahead. And through it all, Dr. Collins remained a steady presence, a source of comfort and understanding. For Amelia, he was more than just a doctor. He was someone who truly understood her connection to Little Shadow, someone who respected her way of seeing the world. With his guidance, Amelia felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that her story, and Little Shadow's, would always be a part of her. The following week brought a whirlwind of tests and appointments. Amelia faced each one with remarkable calm, a quiet courage that impressed everyone around her. To her, each new scan or blood test was another chance to connect with Little Shadow, and she approached it with curiosity rather than fear. She often brought her notebook, drawing new pictures after each appointment, making notes of her observations as if she were a young scientist documenting a great discovery. Her parents, however, were a bundle of nerves. Each new test seemed to draw out their anxieties, as they braced for the news of what lay ahead. They kept their worries hidden from Amelia, but their faces grew more tired with each passing day. James found himself waking up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with unspoken fears. Sarah would sit with him, holding his hand in the darkness, neither of them needing to say anything as they shared the weight of their concerns. For Amelia, the waiting room became a second home. She would sit with her legs swinging over the edge of her chair, watching the comings and goings of doctors and patients, making up stories about each person she saw. Sometimes she would whisper to Little Shadow, describing everything she saw, imagining how her friend might feel about the world outside her body. During one of these waits, Amelia noticed a little boy sitting across from her. He was younger than her, perhaps 5 or 6, and looked frightened, clutching a small stuffed bear. Amelia gave him a reassuring smile and waved. "Hi, I'm Amelia," she said softly, hoping to ease his nerves. The boy looked up, his grip on the bear loosening slightly. "Hi," he replied shyly. "I'm Oliver." "Don't be scared, Oliver," Amelia continued, her tone gentle and confident. "I have a little friend with me, too. And I think you'll be okay. We're all here together." Oliver's eyes widened as he listened to her words. He nodded, a small smile forming on his face, and clutched his bear a little less tightly. Amelia felt a warm sense of satisfaction, as if Little Shadow was helping her be brave for others, too. Finally, the nurse called her name, and she went back for another ultrasound. By now, the process was familiar, the cold gel on her belly, the quiet hum of the machine, the dim lighting of the room. Dr. Collins was there, his presence as comforting as ever, guiding her through each step with his calm voice. "All right, Amelia," he said, glancing at the monitor. "We're going to take another look at Little Shadow today. Are you ready?" Amelia nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen, hoping to catch another glimpse of her mysterious friend. The shapes on the monitor flickered and shifted, and although the images were strange and hard to understand, Amelia felt a deep sense of connection as she watched. She liked to imagine that Little Shadow could see her too, somehow, and that they were silently sharing this moment. Dr. Collins carefully studied the images, his expression thoughtful as he moved the wand over her stomach. After a while, he looked at her and smiled. "I think Little Shadow knows you're watching, Amelia. They seem happy." Amelia's face lit up. "I think so, too," she replied, a small smile spreading across her face. "Maybe they're just shy, like you said." Dr. Collins nodded, a twinkle of admiration in his eyes. "You know, Amelia, you're doing wonderfully. Not everyone has the strength to be as brave as you are." Amelia shrugged modestly. "I'm not really brave. I just want to be friends with Little Shadow. They're part of me." Her words touched Dr. Collins, and he gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Well, I think they're very lucky to have you as a friend." After the ultrasound, Amelia joined her parents in the waiting room. They could see the peaceful look on her face, and it brought them a momentary sense of relief. But even as they held her close, the uncertainty lingered in their minds. Each day felt like a balancing act, caught between the need to stay strong for Amelia and the overwhelming fear of the unknown. Over the next few days, Amelia continued her drawings and stories about Little Shadow. She shared her notebook with Ben, who sat beside her, flipping through the pages with fascination. Though he still found it strange, Ben could see that his sister's friend brought her a sense of peace. He marveled at how she seemed to find joy in something that frightened everyone else. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, Amelia turned to Ben, a curious look in her eyes. "Do you think I'll get to keep a part of Little Shadow, even if they're not with me anymore?" Ben thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I think Little Shadow will always be a part of you, no matter what. They're in all these pictures you drew and the stories you wrote." "They're in here," he said, tapping her heart. Amelia smiled, her eyes shining with a mix of understanding and acceptance. "I like that," she said softly. "That way, they'll always be with me." As the day of the surgery drew closer, Amelia's family struggled to contain their nerves. Sarah and James tried to stay positive, focusing on the hope that this would soon be over, that Amelia would be healthy and whole. But each passing hour felt heavier, the weight of their fears pressing down on them. Amelia sensed the tension, but she chose not to dwell on it. To her, this was just another part of the journey with Little Shadow. She held onto her notebook tightly, knowing that whatever happened, her friend would be with her. And so, they continued waiting, the uncertainty swirling around them like a quiet storm. Amelia's calm demeanor was a source of strength for her family, a reminder that sometimes, even in the face of the unknown, there could be peace. As they waited, Amelia thought back to Dr. Collins's words, feeling reassured by the thought that Little Shadow would always be a part of her story. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready, her heart filled with a quiet determination and a sense of wonder for the journey that had brought her here. The day finally arrived when Dr. Collins would share the results of all the tests and provide a final plan for the surgery. Amelia and her family sat together in the consultation room, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah and James exchanged tense glances, bracing themselves for whatever news might come. Ben had joined them, his usually carefree demeanor replaced by a quiet seriousness as he watched over his little sister. Dr. Collins entered the room, his face calm but with a hint of intensity in his eyes. He took his seat across from them, carefully choosing his words. "Thank you all for being here today. I know this has been a long journey, and you've all shown incredible strength." Amelia looked up at him, her face open and curious. "Are you going to tell me more about Little Shadow?" Dr. Collins nodded, a small smile softening his expression. "Yes, Amelia. I think it's time to tell you everything we know." He took a deep breath before continuing. "Based on the scans and tests we've done, we've confirmed that you have a condition called fetus in fetu. It's a rare situation where a twin doesn't fully develop, and instead, it remains within the other twin's body. In your case, Amelia, your twin, whom you've called Little Shadow, stayed with you in a very unique way." Sarah reached for James's hand, her fingers trembling slightly. Dr. Collins continued, his voice warm but direct. "This undeveloped twin has no chance of growing or living on its own. It's more like a small formation, something that was never meant to be a separate person. The best thing we can do now is remove it to keep you healthy, Amelia." The room fell silent as the weight of Dr. Collins's words settled over them. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, a mix of relief and sorrow for the loss of something she had barely come to understand. James squeezed her hand, his face pale but resolved, and Ben sat quietly, absorbing the news with a thoughtful expression. Amelia, however, seemed unfazed. She looked at Dr. Collins with wide, thoughtful eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. "So, Little Shadow was always part of me, right?" she asked, her tone calm and reflective. Dr. Collins nodded, his gaze softening. "Yes, Amelia. Little Shadow has always been a part of you. And even after the surgery, they'll still be with you, in a way." Amelia seemed to ponder this, her expression filled with a quiet understanding that surprised everyone in the room. "I think, maybe Little Shadow was my special friend all along. Like a little guardian who wanted to be close to me." Her words struck a chord in each of them, filling the room with a profound sense of peace. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears any longer, and she reached over to hug Amelia tightly, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "You're so brave, honey. You're braver than all of us." Amelia hugged her mom back, feeling a sense of calm and acceptance wash over her. She knew that this was the right thing to do, and she felt ready. She had made peace with Little Shadow's presence, and now, she was ready to say goodbye. Dr. Collins went on to explain the surgery in more detail, focusing on keeping it simple so that Amelia could understand. He explained that it would be a straightforward procedure, one that would allow her to heal fully and go back to her life. You might feel sore for a little while afterward, but we'll make sure you're comfortable. And you'll have your family here with you the entire time. Amelia listened carefully, nodding at each point. She had grown to trust Dr. Collins, and his steady reassurance helped calm any flicker of fear that tried to take hold. She looked at him with gratitude, knowing that he had become an important part of her journey. After the meeting, the family left the consultation room, each of them feeling a mix of relief and sadness. As they walked down the hallway, Amelia clutched her notebook tightly, her drawings of Little Shadow held close to her heart. She had made up her mind to finish her story about her friend before the surgery, wanting to leave something behind as a tribute to the strange, beautiful bond they had shared. That evening at home, Amelia sat at her desk, adding the final touches to her story. She wrote about how Little Shadow had stayed with her, always listening and watching, like a quiet guardian. She filled each page with drawings of stars and tiny hearts, symbols of the connection she would always carry with her. To Amelia, the story was a farewell gift, a way to keep her friend alive in memory even after they were no longer together. Sarah sat beside her, watching as her daughter poured her heart into her notebook. The sight brought a bittersweet smile to her face, and she felt a profound admiration for Amelia's courage. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked softly, brushing a hand over Amelia's hair. Amelia looked up, her eyes bright with certainty. "Yes, Mom. Little Shadow is ready too, I think. They'll be happy to rest now." Sarah nodded, her heart heavy yet full of pride. She hugged Amelia tightly, the two of them holding onto each other as if trying to capture the moment in time. That night, the family gathered for a quiet dinner, cherishing each other's presence in a way they hadn't before. Even Ben, who usually teased Amelia, sat beside her, offering her a smile and promising to be by her side every step of the way. As Amelia lay in bed that night, she gazed out her window at the stars, thinking of Little Shadow. In her mind, she imagined them drifting up to join the stars, like a tiny light in the vast night sky. "Goodbye, Little Shadow," she whispered softly, feeling both the sadness of farewell and the peace of acceptance. She drifted off to sleep, her heart light and her mind filled with dreams of stars and skies, knowing that Little Shadow would always be with her, shining quietly like a guardian light in the vastness of her imagination. The morning of the surgery arrived quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Amelia woke up early, her room still cloaked in the soft shadows of dawn. She lay there for a few minutes, listening to the gentle sounds of the house and the comforting presence of her family nearby. Today was the day she would say goodbye to Little Shadow, a thought that filled her with a mix of sadness and peace. She had spent the night dreaming of her friend, picturing them drifting away on a cloud of stars, a gentle wave of farewell from somewhere deep inside her heart. Her parents were up early, too, moving quietly through the house, checking on last-minute details for the trip to the hospital. Sarah double-checked Amelia's overnight bag, making sure she had packed Amelia's favorite stuffed animal, a small, soft bunny that had been her constant companion since she was a toddler. James made a special breakfast, though neither he nor Sarah had much of an appetite. They shared a silent understanding, a resolve to stay strong for their daughter, no matter the weight they both carried inside. When Amelia joined them at the breakfast table, they both put on their best smiles, determined to make her feel as safe and supported as possible. Amelia, always sensitive to the feelings of others, sensed their effort and responded with a calm, quiet strength of her own. "I'm ready, Mom. I think Little Shadow is, too," she said, a small, reassuring smile on her face. She reached over to squeeze her mother's hand, the gesture so full of love and understanding that it nearly brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Ben came downstairs, his usual teasing manner replaced by a quieter, more protective side that he rarely showed. "Hey, kid," he said softly, pulling a chair up next to her. I'll be there the whole time, okay? And when you're done, I'll get you all the ice cream you want." Amelia grinned, her eyes lighting up. "Even the bubblegum flavor?" Ben rolled his eyes, pretending to look disgusted. "Yes, even bubblegum. But don't blame me if your taste buds turn blue." The small burst of laughter broke the tension, and for a moment, they were just a family enjoying breakfast together, without the weight of what was to come. It was exactly what they needed, a simple reminder of their love for each other and the strength that they drew from being together. As they arrived at the hospital, Dr. Collins was there to meet them, his presence as steady and reassuring as ever. He guided them through the check-in process, making sure that Amelia felt comfortable and safe. The surgical team had prepared a room especially for her, with colorful posters and even a small bulletin board where she could hang one of her drawings of Little Shadow. "Is that for me?" Dr. Collins asked, smiling as Amelia placed the drawing on the board. It was a picture of a tiny figure surrounded by stars, with a small, bright heart at its center. "Yes," she replied, looking up at him with a shy smile. "I wanted Little Shadow to have something nice to look at." Dr. Collins placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his admiration for her growing with each passing moment. "It's perfect, Amelia. I think Little Shadow will love it." They walked down the hallway together, Amelia holding tightly to her stuffed bunny, while her parents stayed close, each silently offering her their strength. When they reached the pre-surgical area, a nurse came to prepare Amelia, helping her change into a hospital gown and explaining the process in words she could understand. Amelia listened carefully, nodding along, her calmness never wavering. She asked a few questions, mostly about Little Shadow, making sure that they would be safe during the surgery, a thought that touched everyone who overheard her gentle concern. As the time drew closer, Sarah and James each took a turn hugging Amelia tightly, whispering words of love and encouragement. Ben ruffled her hair gently, smiling down at her with a look of pure admiration. "Remember, I'm getting you that ice cream afterward, so you better not forget." Amelia laughed, the sound filling the room with a warmth that everyone felt. "I won't forget. And don't forget the sprinkles, okay?" Dr. Collins watched the family say their goodbyes, giving them a moment before he stepped in. "Are you ready, Amelia?" he asked softly. Amelia looked up at him, her eyes bright with a mix of determination and peace. "Yes, I'm ready. I think Little Shadow is, too. We're both ready to rest now." Dr. Collins took her hand, guiding her gently into the surgical suite. As she lay back on the table, the nurses moving quietly around her, she held her bunny close, thinking of all the stars she'd drawn and imagining Little Shadow floating among them. One of the nurses leaned in, her voice soothing. "All right, Amelia. We're going to start soon, and we'll take very good care of you and your friend. Just close your eyes, and when you wake up, you'll be all better." Amelia nodded, her eyes growing heavy as the anesthesia took effect. Her last thought was of Little Shadow, her silent friend who had been with her all along. She whispered a final goodbye in her heart, feeling a peaceful warmth wash over her, as if her friend was saying goodbye as well. For her parents, the hours that followed were some of the longest of their lives. They sat together in the waiting room, clinging to each other, drawing strength from each other's presence. Ben sat nearby, occasionally pacing, trying to stay calm. They each carried a quiet hope that everything would go smoothly, and that soon, Amelia would be back with them, whole and healthy. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Collins appeared, his face calm and reassuring. Sarah and James rose to meet him, their hearts pounding. "The surgery went very well," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "Amelia is resting now. She'll need some time to recover, but she came through it beautifully." Relief flooded over them, and Sarah let out a shaky breath, tears filling her eyes. James hugged her tightly, whispering words of gratitude. Ben looked at Dr. Collins with admiration, silently thanking him for bringing his sister back safely. As they prepared to see Amelia in recovery, a sense of peace filled the room, the weight of their worries lifting, replaced by hope. They knew that this journey had changed them, but they also knew that they were stronger for it, bound together by the love that had carried them through. Amelia would wake soon, and when she did, she would be surrounded by the people who loved her most, ready to start a new chapter, her heart full of gratitude for the journey she had shared with Little Shadow. When Amelia finally opened her eyes, the world around her was soft and blurry, as if she were waking up from a deep, comforting dream. The familiar faces of her family came into focus, each one filled with relief and love. Her mom was the first to notice her stirring, and she leaned in, brushing a gentle hand over Amelia's forehead. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of joy and tears. "You did so well. We're all so proud of you." Amelia blinked a few times, the fog of anesthesia gradually lifting. Her mouth felt dry, and her body was sore, but she managed a small smile as she looked up at her mom. She squeezed her mom's hand, feeling the warmth of her family surrounding her. Her dad was there, his hand resting gently on her arm, while Ben stood at the foot of her bed, a nervous smile on his face. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Ben," she whispered, her voice soft and raspy. James smiled, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pride. "Hey, kiddo. You're back. We missed you." Amelia gave a slight nod, her eyes beginning to drift around the room, almost as if she were searching for someone. Her mom noticed and leaned in a little closer. "What is it, honey?" "Little Shadow," Amelia murmured, her voice barely audible. Are they okay?" Sarah's heart ached at her daughter's words, and she squeezed Amelia's hand tightly. "Little Shadow will always be a part of you, sweetheart. They're at peace now." Amelia's face softened, a look of quiet understanding settling over her features. "Good," she whispered. "I think they were ready to rest." The nurse came in shortly after to check Amelia's vitals and make sure she was comfortable. She moved gently around the room, adjusting the blankets and asking Amelia if she felt any pain. Amelia nodded slightly, but when the nurse offered her more medication, she shook her head. She didn't want to be too sleepy, she wanted to be present, to feel the presence of her family and take in every moment of this new chapter. Dr. Collins stopped by as well, his expression one of warmth and pride as he looked down at her. "Amelia, you did wonderfully. You were so brave." Amelia smiled at him, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Collins, for taking care of me and Little Shadow." Dr. Collins gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "It was my honor, Amelia. You've been a light for all of us here. We'll keep a close eye on you for the next few days, but I have no doubt that you'll recover beautifully." As Dr. Collins left, Amelia turned to her family, who remained close, unwilling to leave her side. She felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet acceptance that her journey with Little Shadow had come to a gentle end. She knew her friend was at rest, a part of her forever, and that thought gave her comfort. The next few days passed slowly, filled with small moments of healing and tender care. Amelia's body was sore, and at times the pain made it hard for her to stay cheerful, but her family was always there, bringing her favorite books, playing soft music, or simply sitting beside her, keeping her spirits up. Ben had brought a stack of comic books for her, joking that they were just in case she got bored with all the mushy stuff. They spent hours reading together, laughing quietly as they flipped through the colorful pages, lost in the stories and adventures. Ben was careful not to tease her too much, aware that his sister needed gentle laughter and light-hearted moments to lift her spirits. Every so often, Amelia would reach for her notebook, flipping through the pages of drawings she had made of Little Shadow. She added a few new ones, sketches of her family sitting beside her in the hospital room, each of them with little stars around their heads, as if they too were shining lights in her life. She knew that these memories, and her family's love, would stay with her long after she left the hospital. On the third day, Dr. Collins gave them the good news: Amelia was recovering so well that she could go home soon. The relief was palpable, filling the room with a newfound joy and anticipation. Her parents shared a look of gratitude and hope, knowing that they could finally bring their daughter home, to the safety and comfort of the place where she belonged. As they prepared to leave, Amelia asked for one last moment with Dr. Collins. She handed him her notebook, the pages filled with drawings and words that captured her journey with Little Shadow. "Will you keep this here?" she asked softly. "I want Little Shadow to stay with you, to remind you of us." Dr. Collins looked down at the notebook, his expression tender. "Of course, Amelia. I'll keep it safe. And every time I see it, I'll remember you and Little Shadow." Amelia smiled, a sense of peace and satisfaction filling her heart. She knew that her friend's memory would live on, both with her and with Dr. Collins, and that this chapter of her life would always be a part of her story. As they made their way out of the hospital, Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs. She held her parents' hands tightly, her heart swelling with a sense of freedom and relief. She looked up at the sky, her eyes tracing the clouds as they drifted by, knowing that Little Shadow was at peace, a quiet light shining somewhere in the vastness of her imagination. With each step, she felt stronger, her family surrounding her with love and support, guiding her forward. She knew that whatever challenges came next, she would be ready, her heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. As they drove home, Amelia looked out the window, watching the world rush by, her thoughts quiet and peaceful. She knew that she was beginning a new chapter, one where Little Shadow's memory would stay with her, a guiding light in the vastness of her dreams. Returning home felt like stepping into a familiar dream. The soft light filtering through the windows, the smell of her mom's cooking, and the comforting presence of her family made Amelia feel safe, as if she were finally in a place where she could begin to heal. Her recovery was slow but steady. Each day brought small steps forward, walking from her room to the kitchen without help, spending a little more time outside, and, bit by bit, regaining her strength. Her family remained by her side every moment, encouraging her with gentle words and kind smiles, never pushing her too hard but always reminding her of the progress she was making. Amelia's first few days back were filled with quiet activities. Her mom would read to her, her dad would bring her small projects to keep her hands busy, and Ben would come up with funny stories to make her laugh. It was during one of these moments, while she and her mom were working on a small puzzle together, that Amelia looked up and asked softly, "Do you think Little Shadow is happy now?" Sarah paused, looking at her daughter with a mix of wonder and admiration. "I think so, sweetheart. I think Little Shadow is resting peacefully, knowing that they'll always be a part of you." Amelia nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tracing the edge of a puzzle piece. "I feel like they're still here, somehow. Like they're in my heart, or maybe, in the stars." Her mom smiled, feeling a swell of pride at her daughter's wisdom. "I think you're right, Amelia. And every time you look up at the stars, you'll remember that Little Shadow is shining along with them." These thoughts brought Amelia comfort, and each night before she went to bed, she would spend a few moments looking out her bedroom window at the sky. She liked to think that one of those small, distant stars was her friend, a reminder of the special bond they had shared. It was a peaceful feeling, one that gave her strength even on the tougher days. As her physical strength returned, Amelia also found herself growing emotionally stronger. She began to see her experience with Little Shadow as something special, a journey that had shown her just how resilient she could be. She realized that she was capable of facing her fears, of carrying love and gratitude even through difficult times. And that knowledge became a source of pride for her. One afternoon, as she was sorting through her drawings and the notes she had made about Little Shadow, an idea began to take shape in her mind. She wanted to share her story, not just for herself, but for other kids who might be facing similar journeys. She thought about the kids she'd seen at the hospital, the worried faces of children waiting for test results, and the quiet bravery she had witnessed in the waiting room. She wanted them to know that they weren't alone. With her mom's help, she began creating a small book, filled with the drawings and stories she had made for Little Shadow. She added words of encouragement on each page, simple messages like "Be brave" and "You're never alone." She hoped that, by sharing her experience, she could help others find the same strength that Little Shadow had helped her discover. Ben took notice of her project one day as he walked by her room, where she was carefully coloring in one of her illustrations. He sat down beside her, watching her work in silence for a moment before speaking. "You're really making a whole book, huh?" Amelia nodded, a determined look on her face. Yes. I want other kids to know that even if they feel scared, they can be brave. Just like Little Shadow helped me be brave. Ben smiled, reaching over to gently nudge her shoulder. You're amazing, you know that? Not everyone would want to share something so personal. Amelia shrugged, her cheeks turning a bit pink. I think it's important. I don't want anyone to feel alone. With her family's encouragement, Amelia continued working on the book, pouring her heart into each page. It became a celebration of her journey with Little Shadow, a tribute to the friend she had carried inside her, and a message of hope and resilience for anyone who needed it. One evening, after she had finished the final page, she gathered her family in the living room and showed them the completed book. Each page was filled with drawings, colors, and simple words that captured her experience. Her parents looked through it with misty eyes, moved by the depth of love and courage their daughter had shown. Sarah hugged Amelia tightly, whispering, "You've created something beautiful, sweetheart. I think this will help a lot of people." Amelia leaned into her mom's embrace, feeling a deep sense of pride and peace. "It's for Little Shadow, too," she murmured. "I want them to know that they'll always be with me." The next day, they took her book to the hospital, where Dr. Collins had arranged a small gathering of the nurses and staff who had been part of her journey. Amelia stood before them, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of excitement and nerves, as she shared her book and told them about her time with Little Shadow. Dr. Collins looked through her book with quiet admiration, his face softening as he took in each page. "Amelia, you've done something truly special," he said, his voice warm and full of pride. "You've turned your journey into a message of hope, and I know this will mean a lot to other kids who are going through tough times." Amelia beamed, feeling the warmth of his words settle over her like a comforting blanket. She knew that her story with Little Shadow was something she would carry forever, a part of her heart that would never fade. As they left the hospital, her family walked with her, each of them feeling a new sense of peace. Amelia looked up at the sky, her gaze tracing the stars beginning to peek out in the early evening light. She knew that, no matter where life took her, she would always be guided by the quiet, shining presence of Little Shadow, a guardian light in the vastness of her dreams. The weeks that followed marked a new chapter in Amelia's life, one filled with growth, laughter, and the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. The book she'd created for Little Shadow became a treasured part of her family's life, something they would pull out on quiet evenings to admire and remember the journey they had all shared. But the book didn't stay within their family for long. Dr. Collins had been so moved by Amelia's story that he spoke with the hospital director about the possibility of sharing it with other children and families. With Sarah and James's permission, the hospital created copies of Amelia's book to keep in waiting rooms and patient areas, where kids could read it and find comfort. Amelia didn't fully grasp how much her story meant to others until the first letters started arriving. Children and parents who had read her book began writing to thank her for sharing her journey, expressing how her courage had given them hope during difficult times. Some letters came from kids who had been scared before their own surgeries, and others from parents who were grateful for the way her story had helped their children face their fears. One letter, in particular, stood out to Amelia. It was from a girl her age named Sophie, who was about to have surgery for a heart condition. Sophie wrote that, after reading Amelia's story, she had decided to name her own special friend Heartbeat. Sophie shared how she'd drawn pictures of Heartbeat and talked to them, just as Amelia had done with Little Shadow. Reading Sophie's letter, Amelia felt a deep sense of connection and joy, knowing that her journey with Little Shadow had given someone else the courage to face their own challenges. "It's like Little Shadow is helping other kids, too," she told her mom, her eyes shining with quiet pride. As word of Amelia's book spread, she was invited to share her story with other groups of children in her community. At first, the idea made her nervous, but with her family's encouragement, she decided to give it a try. She stood before small groups in libraries, schools, and community centers, her voice growing stronger with each story she told, her confidence blossoming. Amelia spoke about Little Shadow as if they were still with her, a silent friend who had taught her the true meaning of courage and resilience. She explained how she had learned to find strength in the unknown, to embrace love and gratitude, and to remember that even the quietest presences could leave a lasting light in one's heart. Each time she spoke, Amelia noticed how people's faces softened, their expressions filled with admiration and empathy. She could feel Little Shadow's presence, a calm warmth that seemed to guide her words and fill her with confidence. She knew that her friend's memory would live on, not only in her own heart but in the hearts of others who needed that same hope and strength. Eventually, Amelia's story reached a local newspaper, and a journalist came to interview her. They sat together on the family's porch, where Amelia shared the journey she'd been on and spoke about the quiet, magical bond she had felt with her little friend. The article highlighted her resilience and the way she had transformed a difficult experience into a source of light for others. As the newspaper published her story, more people reached out, including teachers and parents from nearby towns, asking for copies of her book to share with their students and families. With each message and every request, Amelia's heart swelled, knowing that Little Shadow's memory was bringing comfort and courage to so many. One evening, as she and her family sat together on the porch, gazing up at the stars, Sarah reached over and took Amelia's hand. "You know, sweetheart, you've created something beautiful, something that will touch people for a long time." Amelia looked up at her mom, a small, shy smile on her face. "I think Little Shadow would be proud. They were with me through everything, and now they're with everyone who needs a friend." James wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his voice filled with pride. "You've turned something difficult into something wonderful, Amelia. I think that's a gift not everyone has." Ben, who had been listening quietly, leaned over and playfully ruffled her hair. "Yeah, you're kind of a hero, you know that?" Amelia giggled, swatting his hand away. "Not a hero. I just wanted to share my story, our story." As they sat together, a peaceful silence settled over them, each of them reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The stars above seemed to twinkle a little brighter that night, as if Little Shadow were shining down on them, a gentle, reassuring presence. Amelia knew that life would continue to bring new challenges and adventures, but she also knew that she would never face them alone. She had her family, her friends, and the memory of her quiet, steadfast companion who had taught her the power of love, courage, and resilience. From that day forward, whenever she felt uncertain or scared, Amelia would close her eyes, take a deep breath, and think of Little Shadow, a tiny light in the vastness of her heart, a reminder that no matter where she went or what she faced, she would always carry the strength to persevere. And somewhere, in the quiet of her imagination, she knew that Little Shadow would always be with her, watching over her, a soft glow of love and hope guiding her through life's unknowns.